The unexpected rebellion. The shriek of metal echoed through the bridge as Captain Galen slammed his fist into the control console, denting the titanium panel. The subjugation of the human colony had gone disastrously wrong. These small, soft, pitiful humans were supposed to be easy prey, but they fought with a savage ferocity that caught the Leons completely off guard. The human slaves overthrew their new masters in a matter of days. "We should have taken their dogs instead," Galen snarled at his executive officer, Taro. "Did you see those earth beasts rip out the throats of our soldiers? What madness compelled us to enslave the ones who created such perfect killing machines?" Taro pulled up a data file on the canines. Most of the breeds were engineered by humans to guard, fight, and kill on command, perfectly obedient tools of violence. He showed the file to Galen. "Look at this, sir. It's not just the dogs. Humans reshape every species they touch to serve their will. They adopted the weakest creatures in the galaxy and forged them into the strongest weapons. That's humanity's true power." Galen waved away the screen. "If we had their strength and durability, the galaxy would already be ours. Their physical gifts are wasted on them." Galen and Taro shared a look. This lone human captive might hold the key to defeating its dangerous species. They would get the truth out of it, no matter what it took. The fate of the Leon Empire depended on breaking this human. But as the humans' screams started echoing through the ship, the aliens began to wonder just what kind of monster they had brought aboard their vessel, and what it would do to them when it finally broke free. The secret revealed. A commotion erupted on the bridge as the human prisoner was forced through the blast doors, manacled, and flanked by a squad of Leon guards. Despite his restraints, the human moved with a swagger, his eyes flashing defiantly. The security team regarded their captive uneasily, tightening their grips on their shock bands. Even outnumbered and shackled, this lone human seemed to radiate danger. The human looked up at Galen, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Then, to the shock of all present, he began to laugh. A dark, humorless chuckle that sent chills down the spines of the Leon crew. "You want to know humanity's big secret," the human said, his voice rough from thirst and pain. "It's not a secret at all. You're just too blind to see it." Galen's fists clenched, but he held himself back. "Enlighten us, then, human." The prisoner straightened as much as his bonds would allow. "My name is Jess Clark, and humanity's greatest weapon is the ability to see potential where you see only weakness." Jessa looked around the bridge, taking in the advanced alien technology and the hostile faces of his captors. "When we first met other species, we were shocked. So many of you culled your runts, exterminated the sick and imperfect, just like you Leons do." Galen's eyes narrowed. How did this human know so much about their ways? "But humans," Jesse continued, "we don't think like that. We adopt the broken, the discarded, and we turn them into our protectors, our partners. We make them strong." The human's gaze settled on a flickering holo image floating above the strategy table. It showed a small, timid creature with wide eyes and quivering whiskers. A cake, the Leon's favorite prey species. You look at the cakes and see easy meat, but humans would have seen their intelligence, their empathy. Under our guidance, engineered like the dogs of Earth, the cakes would have become a force to be reckoned with. Galen scoffed openly. "You speak madness, human. The cakes are weak, as are you, and the weak shall always be ruled by the strong." Fire flashed in Jess's eyes. "That's where you're wrong, Captain. Humanity's strength comes from uplifting others, from seeing the value in every species, and that's something your kind will never understand." The human's words struck a nerve. With a roar of rage, Galen seized Jesse by the throat, lifting him bodily off the deck. "I will have the truth from you, even if I must rip it from your broken corpse." But even as he gasped for air, the human called Jess Clark showed no fear. He met Galen's furious gaze and forced a strained grin. "Do your worst, Captain. It won't change a thing. You've already lost this war. You just don't know it yet." The hidden potential. Light years away from the tense confrontation on the Leon warship, Captain Galen's teenage son, Thal, trudged along a dirt path, kicking at loose pebbles. He was part of a mandatory school field trip to the Cake Wildlife Preserve on the Leon homeworld. Thal's classmates snickered and jeered as they observed the small, meek creatures scampering about their enclosures. "Look at those pathetic little runts," Thal's friend Zorek sneered, tossing a rock at a keek, who let out a frightened squeak and darted for cover. "No wonder they're only good for target practice and meat." Thal nodded, but his heart wasn't in it. He found the docile kikes incredibly boring. As the teacher droned on about the kike's role in the ecosystem, Thal slipped away from the group, wandering off into a dense copse of trees. He figured he'd catch a quick nap and rejoin the class before anyone noticed his absence. But as he pushed through the underbrush, Thal stumbled into a hidden section of the preserve he had never seen before. He froze, his jaw dropping in shock. There, in a small clearing, stood an elderly human male surrounded by a group of keeks. The cakes were not cowering or fleeing, but were eagerly circling the human, chittering excitedly. Thal watched in disbelief as the human guided the keeks through what appeared to be an obstacle course, gesturing for them to climb, jump, and weave their way through a series of complex barriers. The cakes responded with surprising speed and agility, navigating the course with ease. Next, the human held up a series of colored shapes, and the cakes quickly sorted them into matching piles. Finally, the human issued a series of verbal commands, and the cakes performed a dizzying array of acrobatic maneuvers in perfect synchronization. Thal rubbed his eyes, convinced he was hallucinating. Keeks were supposed to be dumb, primitive creatures, yet these ones were displaying intelligence and physical prowess far beyond anything he had ever seen or heard of. Lost in his thoughts, Thal didn't notice the human had spotted him until the man called out in perfect Leon, "Hello there, young man. No need to be afraid. Why don't you come closer and see for yourself what these remarkable creatures can do?" Thal's heart pounded in his chest as he weighed his options. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his curiosity won out. Cautiously, he approached the human, who smiled warmly and extended a wrinkled hand. "Dr. Emmett Roth, xenobiologist." The human introduced himself. "I've been studying the keeks in secret for many years, and I must say, they never cease to amaze me." But how?" Thal sputtered, gesturing at the cakes, who were now solving a complex puzzle box with their dexterous paws. Cakes are supposed to be simple, stupid creatures. Nothing like this. Dr. Roth showed Thal page after page of meticulous notes and observations detailing the cake's hidden abilities. Thal's mind reeled as he struggled to process this new information. "If what you're saying is true," Thal said slowly, "then the cakes could be so much more than prey or pests. They could be." He trailed off, hardly daring to voice the thought aloud. "Partners," Dr. Roth finished gently. "Allies, friends even. Yes, young man, that's precisely what they could be, what they should be." Thal looked at the cakes with new eyes, seeing past the timid, quivering exteriors to the untapped potential within. His whole world felt like it had been turned upside down. Dr. Roth placed a weathered hand on Thal's shoulder. "I can see the wheels turning in your head, son. You're starting to question what you've been taught, and that's a good thing." The human's eyes twinkled with warmth and wisdom. "I'd like to teach you more about the cakes, if you're willing to learn, to open your mind to new possibilities. What do you say?" Thal swallowed hard, his heart racing. He knew he should say no, should run back to the safety of his classmates and the comfortable lies he had been fed his whole life. But something stopped him, a flicker of doubt, a spark of curiosity that refused to be extinguished. He met Dr. Roth's gaze and nodded slowly. "Teach me." A dangerous alliance. In the weeks that followed his fateful encounter with Dr. Roth, Thal found himself sneaking away from his duties and classes with increasing frequency. Under the guise of solitary nature walks, he ventured deep into the wildlife preserve, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. There, in a secluded glade, he met with the human xenobiologist and a small group of cakes handpicked for their exceptional intelligence and adaptability. At first, Thal was hesitant to interact with the creatures he had been taught to view as inferior. But as he watched Dr. Roth patiently guide the cakes through a series of increasingly complex tasks and challenges, his skepticism gave way to awe. The cakes learned at an astonishing rate, their nimble paws manipulating tools and solving puzzles with a dexterity that rivaled even the most skilled Leon engineers. More than their cognitive abilities, however, it was the kike's capacity for empathy and cooperation that truly astounded Thal. He watched as they worked together seamlessly, communicating with a complex language of chirps and gestures that Dr. Roth seemed to understand intuitively. And when one of their number struggled with a particular task, the others would rally around them, offering encouragement and support until they succeeded. As the days turned into weeks, Thal found himself growing increasingly attached to his new companions. He marveled at their progress and the deep bonds they formed with one another and with Dr. Roth. For the first time in his life, he began to question the rigid hierarchies and prejudices that underpinned Leon society. But their clandestine activities could not remain hidden forever. One fateful afternoon, as Thal and Dr. Roth were overseeing a particularly challenging obstacle course, the sharp crack of a plasma rifle shattered the tranquil forest air. Thal whirled around to see a heavily armed Leon security patrol emerging from the trees, their weapons trained on the human and the cakes. "Thal, run!" Dr. Roth yelled, pushing the young Leon behind him as he reached for his own sidearm. The cakes scattered in all directions, their terrified squeaks echoing through the glade. Thal hesitated for a split second, torn between his instinct to obey authority and his newfound loyalty to his friends. But as the patrol opened fire, sending searing bolts of plasma scorching past his head, he made his choice. Grabbing Dr. Roth's hand, he pulled the human into the dense undergrowth, the kikes close on their heels. They ran for what felt like hours, the sounds of pursuit never far behind. Finally, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat, they collapsed in a small clearing, the cakes huddling close for comfort and protection. As they caught their breath, Dr. Roth turned to Thal, his eyes grave. "There's something you need to know," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I'm not just a xenobiologist studying the cakes. I'm part of a covert human organization dedicated to uplifting and protecting vulnerable species across the galaxy." Thal's eyes widened in shock as Dr. Roth continued. "We've been working to establish a network of keek resistance cells on Leos, with the goal of eventually overthrowing the Leon regime and creating a more equitable society, one where cakes and Leons can coexist as equals." Thal's mind reeled at the revelation. A keek resistance, overthrowing the government. It was almost too much to process. But as he looked around at the cakes, their intelligent eyes watching him with trust and hope, he felt a stirring of something deep within him, a sense of rightness, of purpose. Just as Dr. Roth opened his mouth to share more details about the resistance movement, a plasma bolt sizzled through the air, striking the human in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him, as the kikes let out shrieks of terror and despair. Thal didn't hesitate. Ignoring the searing pain in his lungs, he grabbed Dr. Roth under the arms and dragged him deeper into the forest, away from the sounds of the approaching patrol. The cakes scattered into the undergrowth, their mournful cries fading into the distance. Finally, when he could run no further, Thal collapsed next to Dr. Roth, cradling the human's head in his lap. The xenobiologist's breathing was shallow and labored, his eyes glazed with pain. With a trembling hand, Dr. Roth pressed a small data drive into Thal's palm. "This contains information about the resistance network and the location of our secret base on Leos. Get it to Jesse. He's our only hope now," Dr. Roth gasped, his voice barely above a whisper. Thal nodded, tears streaming down his face as he watched the life drain from Dr. Roth's eyes. The human's grip on his hand slackened, and his head lolled to the side, a final breath escaping his lips. For a long moment, Thal sat there, numb with shock and grief. Then, slowly, he got to his feet, the data drive clutched tightly in his fist. He looked around at the silent forest, the weight of his newfound knowledge and responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He was alone now, torn between his loyalty to his own people and his growing belief in the humans' cause. But as he thought of the cakes, of their untapped potential, and the bonds he had formed with them, he knew what he had to do. Taking a deep breath, Thal turned his face toward the distant city where the human prisoner Jess Clark was being held. He had a message to deliver, a resistance to join, and a choice to make that would determine not only his own fate, but the future of the cakes and the Leyan people. The escape. The cell door slammed open with a metallic clang. 2 heavily armed Leyan guards stormed in, plasma rifles leveled at Jess's chest. The human tensed, ready to fight, but before he could make a move, a small blur of fur and claws launched itself at the guards. Zix moved with blinding speed, his tiny form darting between the guard's legs. The cake lashed out with surgical precision, striking at pressure points and nerve clusters with a mastery that left Jesse stunned. In seconds, the guards crumpled to the floor, their weapons clattering uselessly beside them. Jesse gaped at Zix, astonishment and pride warring on his battered face. Zix, that was incredible. When did you learn to fight like that? The cake chittered softly, his large eyes gleaming with intelligence. Jesse teach Zix. Zix learn, adapt, grow strong like Jesse say. Together. The unlikely duo burst out of the cell block, alarms blaring in their wake. Leyan soldiers poured into the corridors, plasma bolts sizzling through the air. Jess and Zix moved as one, the human providing covering fire while the cake darted ahead, scouting the path and disabling security systems with a few deft swipes of his claws. As they fought their way deeper into the ship, Jesse caught sight of a communications room. Zix, cover me, he shouted, ducking inside. His fingers flew over the alien controls, muscle memory from a lifetime of training guiding his movements. In seconds, he had composed a coded message detailing their location and the Leyan ship's weaknesses. With a final keystroke, he sent the transmission winging towards the incoming human fleet. Just as they turned to leave, a plasma bolt seared past Jess's head, missing by millimeters. Galen stood in the doorway, a platoon of heavily armed soldiers at his back. The Leyan captain's face twisted with rage and disgust as he took in the sight of Jesse and Zix, standing side by side, weapons raised. You dare corrupt one of our own with your vile human ideals? Galen snarled, leveling his rifle at Jess's chest. The cakes are nothing, a footnote in the Leyan Empire's glorious history, and you will die for your insolence. Plasma bolts filled the air as Jesse and Zix dove for cover, returning fire with a hail of precisely aimed shots. The human and the cake moved in perfect synchronicity, their bond forged through shared hardship and a fierce belief in each other's potential. Galen roared with fury, charging forward through the chaos. He slammed into Jesse, sending them both tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs. The Leyan captain rained down blows, his eyes alight with hatred. You think the cakes are your equals? Galen sneered, his fists hammering into Jess's ribs. You're a fool, human. The weak will always serve the strong. That is the natural order of things. Jess blocked a punch and rolled, coming up in a crouch. You're wrong, Galen, he panted, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Strength comes from unity, from trust, something you'll never understand. Galen lunged forward, his hands closing around Jess's throat. The human choked, spots dancing before his eyes. But just as the darkness threatened to claim him, a small furry form crashed into Galen's back. Zix sank his teeth into the Leon's neck, his claws scrabbling for purchase. Galen howled in pain, his grip on Jess loosening. The human surged upward, driving his fist into Galen's jaw with every ounce of strength he possessed. The Leon captain crumpled, his eyes rolling back in his head. Jesse staggered to his feet, gasping for air. Zix leaped down beside him, blood staining his fur. "Good work, little buddy," Jesse rasped, ruffling the cake's ears. "Now let's get the hell off this ship." They sprinted through the corridors, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. The hangar bay doors loomed ahead, a promise of freedom. But as they rounded the final corner, Jesse skidded to a halt, his heart leaping into his throat. There, blocking their path, stood Thal.